It's hard to remember now, but Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation began as a probe into Russian collusion. You'll recall the story we were told then. A foreign power influenced the outcome of our election. We've got to figure out how exactly that happened and determine if any American citizens were involved in that plot. Well, that's how the whole thing was sold to the rest of us. And by the way, some Republicans on Capitol Hill still seem to believe that's what it's about. Nobody ever accused them of genius. But to the rest of us, it's pretty obvious what's going on. And to make it even clearer, Robert Mueller just hired a new prosecutor the other day. Once again, another Hillary donor. There doesn't seem to be a single Republican on Robert Mueller's staff. In an evenly divided country, what are the odds of that? Well, 100% actually, once you understand the purpose of this whole exercise. What you're looking at is a political campaign waged with guns and subpoenas and the surveillance power of the U.S. government. In conventional politics, the kind we used to have, Republican candidates, Democratic candidates run against each other. One wins, one loses, sometimes someone retires. That's how we used to conduct it. Now, lives are being destroyed forever. People are going bankrupt. Others are heading to prison. Well, today, a federal judge finally tried to slam the brakes on all of this. District Court Judge T.S. Ellis erupted in a way that federal judges rarely do. He accused Mueller and his team of granting themselves, quote, unfettered power to wage politics rather than a legitimate criminal investigation. Quote, you don't really care about Paul Manafort's bank fraud, the judge said. You really care about what information Mr. Manafort can give you to lead to Mr. Trump and an impeachment or whatever. It was a shocking moment precisely because what he said was entirely true. And yet somehow the Mueller investigation continues tonight, leaving lives in its wake. Mueller's latest target, according to recent news reports, is longtime Republican political consultant Roger Stone. Roger Stone joins us right now. Roger, thanks for coming on. So, according to NBC, and I want to read you a quote I know you're familiar with, you are, quote, one of the top subjects of the investigation into potential collusion between Moscow and the Trump campaign. NBC says Robert Mueller is, quote, focusing intensely on you. What about you has triggered the scrutiny of Mueller? What crime is he suggesting you committed?
Well, Tucker, perhaps it's my advocacy of the election of Donald Trump and my 40-year friendship for him and my role in advocating and working for his election. I like to call this the Russian collusion delusion. So far, he has turned up no evidence of collusion by the Russian state. I certainly am not involved in any conspiracy or coordination or collusion with the Russian state. I think this is a fairy tale, a left-wing conspiracy theory that is the basis for a rogue operation to undo the results of the last election.
But meanwhile, it's an actual active criminal investigation. And according to NBC, the CNBC story, Mueller is looking at you because of your longtime friendship, it suggests, with Rick Gates, who was the associate of Paul Manafort, who was indicted and pled to a number of felonies. It said he was an intern in an office that you had 30 years ago and that you had repeated contact with him. It didn't say about what. To what extent is that true?
Well, our longtime relationship, I think the first time I met him was in 2016. I don't believe he worked at Black, Manafort and Stone back in the 80s. He evidently was an intern in the successor firm after I left. The CNBC story specifically says that the special counsel is focused on our dinners with an S. I only know of one dinner attended by many, the purpose of which was to discuss the apportionment of the New York delegates to the Republican National Convention to try to make sure there were a few Trump supporters on the delegation after Donald Trump swept the New York primary. They're also, according to CNBC, focusing on my meetings with Mr. Gates at Trump Tower, at which there were absolutely none. This whole thing is based on conjecture, speculation, supposition, but no facts. My contacts with Rick Gates during the campaign were minimal and innocuous. I hate to say this, but I think the source for this CNBC story, I think they got bullshiffed, as some Republicans now say.
Well, speaking of Congressman Adam Schiff, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, he said before the Congress and his remarks were echoed by Hillary Clinton, that you knew ahead of time that Hillary campaign chairman John Podesta's Gmail account had been hacked by the Russians and its contents were going to become public. Did you know that? How did you know that, if so, and why would he say that?
That is categorically false. It's a shame that Congressman Schiff is allowed to hide behind his congressional immunity. Even the final report of the House Intelligence Committee truncates and incorrectly quotes my now iconic tweet. I said, "The Podestas," referring to both John and Tony's, "time in the barrel will come," referring to entirely public information published in the Panama Papers early in 2016 that exposed their shady business dealings in Russia. Context: Paul Manafort's business dealings in the Ukraine were being fed to the media at the time. I thought it only fair that the facts regarding the Podestas come forward. Nowhere did I say that his email would be hacked. I had no advanced knowledge of that hack. Just while we're on it, to be clear, I never received any material from WikiLeaks or Assange. I never passed anything on to Donald Trump, and I never had any contact with the Russian state and received nothing from them, including allegedly hacked emails. As I said earlier, this is a left-wing conspiracy theory promulgated by people like Robbie Mook and others, Adam Schiff, surfer boy Eric Swalwell. They hide behind their congressional immunity, and they run a campaign of smear, innuendo, and personal attack.
But this isn't just a public relations campaign waged by members of Congress against Republicans. There's a criminal component to it. So news reports have said that you were the subject of a FISA warrant. In other words, the federal government was reading your email, tapping your phone, following you around, whatever, was surveilling you using our intel and law enforcement agencies. Do you believe that's true?
Well, the New York Times reported on January 20th of 2017 that I was the subject of a FISA warrant. What their probable cause would be is hard to understand, other than my strong support for Donald Trump. Again, I wish this were just a public relations value. I have the Project for Democracy, an Obama-blessed front, suing me in the District of Columbia. What's their claim? Oh, that I worked with the Russians to hack the DNC email and gave the information to WikiLeaks. They don't produce any evidence or proof. They produce a theory. Now, the Democratic National Committee has filed a virtually mirror lawsuit in the courts in New York. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars just to move to dismiss these suits. I'm facing the prospect of
what does this investigation cost you?
Well, between the House Intelligence Committee, the Project Democracy or Project for Democracy lawsuit, the early rumblings of the Senate Intelligence and Judiciary Committee, a lawsuit in Miami from a Chinaman named Miles Kwok, which is a total quack of Schiff, and the prospect now of a probe by Mr. Mueller into non-existent communications and machinations with Mr. Gates, I could be looking at legal fees of up to $1 million. Anybody who wants to help can go to stonedefensefund.com. I have no choice to go on InfoWars, where I do a daily show, to come here and to beg for money to protect the solvency and the college education of my grandchildren.
You better be a Russian agent. I mean it. I hope you're a Russian agent. Otherwise, this really is a miscarriage and an assault on the civil liberties of all of us. And I wish the left agreed with me on that. Roger Stone, thank you.